Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. It's Friday, so that means we are talking about entertainment. And the focus this week is OTT. It stands for over the top, but perhaps not as you most commonly know or use it in your everyday conversations, if you are one of those people that uses it. The over the top here refers to streaming content to customers directly over the web or through other smart devices such as your TV, tablet or phone. For many people, it does represent the future of entertainment and a field that is rapidly evolving through services such as Netflix, Amazon Prime and Disneyplus, to name just a few.
Yes, and in fact, monthly active users of Netflix in South Korea are in the order of several million people, and the number is increasing. So we wanted to dig deeper into why the format is proving increasingly more appealing to consumers than traditional alternatives like, going to the cinema, watching cable TV, or buying a DVD set for their favorite series. Now for this, we turn to our Jason Bejervaise, a Seoul-based film critic and a familiar face to many of you who regularly tune into Arirang TV. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Mogyeong. Good morning, Mark.
Thank you.
Now, Jason, let's get straight to the crux of it. Why are streaming platforms like Netflix exploding in popularity, not only in Korea, but around the world?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think people are growing tired of the studio tentpoles. Of course, the Marvel films are popular, but the studios have long been reliant on franchises and sequels, and streamers such as Netflix, they've been more ambitious and bold in the way they approach their content. They're also financing a lot of non-English language content. And I think, audiences are really responding to that. And I think many of the changes that we're seeing in the so-called, the ecosystem, I think have been accelerated during the COVID pandemic. So there are more people at home. And certainly in the United States, there are signs that even before COVID, that more and more people were watching films at home, especially young families. And so, the streamers, most notably Netflix, but also, Amazon Prime, we're seeing other kind of big players coming into the system now. They've really kind of exploited this marketplace. And I think it's reminiscent in a sense of some of the changes that happened in the 60s and 70s when people were watching television shows at home.
Now, a growing number of people, especially the younger generation, just default to streaming or YouTube over cable TV or similar options available to them. Do you think these OTT streaming services are going to eventually wash away cable TV? And if so, how quickly do you think this is all going to unfold?
No, I don't think they're going to wash away. I think they're going to coexist. It's difficult to predict exactly what will happen. It's all very uncertain. But certainly in Korea, if you look at some of the big kind of cable channels, you've got TVN, you've got JTBC, and they're owned by big companies, and they're positioning themselves very, very strategically at the moment. You've got JTBC that's owned by the Jungang Group. You've got TVN, which is owned by CJ. And they're financing a lot of Korean content. You've got Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, you've got Sky Castle. These are enormously popular shows in Korea. Koreans still watch a lot of their content through cable and terrestrial channels. And sure enough, in terms of the viewership, the terrestrial channels are seeing a gradual decline. But that has been evident for a number of years owing to the cable channels. Certainly Netflix and the other streamers that are entering the system, certainly they're changing things, and we're going to see streaming wars kind of hit full gear over the next few months and few years. But I do think ultimately they will coexist, but there will be some kind of consolidation. And Netflix, in terms of the content they're financing, it's very, very expensive, and so it's going to be difficult for the smaller players to be able to compete.
Now, like you just said, Jason, there's no denying the future of OTT is extremely bright. And you only need to look at the global success of Squid Game on Netflix to prove that point. And even looking back just 2 to 3 years, the Netflix back then is unrecognizable to what it is now, both in terms of quality and breadth of its content. Now, given that it's moving so rapidly, what do you imagine OTT services might be like in the next 5 years?
Well, it's interesting. I think about Okja sometimes, and certainly the reception to that. You remember in Cannes in 2017, and here in Korea, the multiplexes refused to screen the film because of this so-called 3-week window between its release in theaters and online. And the conglomerates or the chaebols, the multiplexes were up in arms about that. And yet here we are a few years later, and it's a completely different ecosystem. And so trying to predict what's going to happen over the next few years is going to be difficult. But I think with Netflix coming in, we're seeing Netflix are here now. But there are also drawbacks with Netflix. And I think the success of Squid Game, I think it's an amazing success of the Korean culture industry. But also the thing is with Netflix is they own the IP. And so that's a warning, I think, for Korean directors and those who want to produce this incredible content that's very, very popular. And so I think there's an opportunity here for the local players to be able to exploit that. So Netflix does have its global reach. It does have huge pockets. But I think there is potential there for the local streamers, the local content providers to be able to compete with Netflix in providing some of these filmmakers with allowing them to have IP. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Okja because now there's a big controversy about the movie June and the fact that in the United States, HBO Plus was streaming that as it was in US cinemas. So we're seeing more and more of this kind of infighting between the studios and these streaming giants. But finally, we just want to quickly finish on another huge giant is preparing to wade into the South Korean market. Di즈니플러스 going to start here mid-November. The company says it will cost around $8 to $9 a month to subscribe. Now, despite Disney offering all this content, they've got Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and other brands. Do you think it's going to be enough to turn Koreans' heads away from Netflix? Or do you think it's mainly going to attract that overflow of people who can afford the luxury of being able to subscribe to both, or those parents who have kids and the kids insist that they have Di즈니플러스 and Netflix?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Disney obviously have, they are a big draw. They were the best performing studio in Korea in 2019. Into films such as The Avengers and Aladdin, and their library isn't really impressive. So, I mean, looking at their lineup, though, over the next few years, it seems like they're focusing, they're certainly focusing on Korea, but I think also Asia as a whole. It seems to be a different approach to Netflix in that Netflix, I think, are financing Korean content, but I think they're keen to export it to not only Asia, but across the world. And so, me personally, I was less kind of enthusiastic about Di즈니플러스's lineup, but certainly they do have a big catalog, and we'll have to see what happens going forward. And I think what perhaps might happen is, we'll see some people who just turn over to Disney, whereas other people may choose to subscribe to both services. But ultimately, we're going to see a lot of services coming into Korea. We've got Apple as well, Apple TV Plus, which is coming in just, I think, next week with very little warning. So, yes, it's going to be a very interesting time for the Korean film industry.
Okay, well, we'll have to look forward to it. Now, Jason, always good to get you on, and we're glad you could join us. Now, that was Seoul-based film critic Jason Bejervaise on the rise of streaming services. Thank you, Jason. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.